So now we're going to jump into a new technology that we haven't used yet, and that's Sass. So Sass stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets, and it's a CSS preprocessor, which is a scripting language that extends CSS by allowing developers to write code in one language and compile it to CSS. Now, the language is nearly identical to CSS with the addition of some extra functionality. So don't look at this as learning a whole new language. As long as you know basic CSS, which you should if you've been following along in this course, then you should be fine. So Sass files can use a .sass or a .scss file extension. SCS is more common, and that's what we'll be working with. Sass isn't the only CSS precompiler or preprocessor. There's also Less and Stylus, which are pretty popular also. So what can Sass do? That's the magic question. Sass basically turns a style sheet language, CSS, into a programming language which has logic. Alright, first of all, one of the most helpful features is variables. We can set variables just like we do in JavaScript or PHP or any other real programming language. We may have a header, a footer, and a body background that all have the same color. If we wanted to change that color, we'd have to update it in multiple places. But with Sass, we can provide one variable, and we can update that one variable and have it change in all those places at once. So that's extremely helpful. We can also nest styles, just like we do with HTML tags. We can now nest CSS declarations. Partials, we can include Sass files in other Sass files, and we do this by importing them. Partials have to start with an underscore. We also have something called mix-ins, which are basically functions that can be called throughout the file. Okay, so we can bunch CSS declarations together and run them at once. We can extend and inherit styles between selectors, and finally we can perform operations and calculations. So these are all things that CSS by itself can't do, but with Sass we can do all this stuff. So variables, we can use them in our CSS code or in our Sass code as we would in a true programming language. Variables in Sass have to start with the money sign symbol, and here's an example down here. You can see we have a variable called font stack. We're setting it to Helvetica sans serif, and we also have a primary color variable which is set to the hexadecimal value 333. And then down here in our styles we have our font where we're saying we want it to be 100%, and then we're also inserting this variable which is the Helvetica sans serif. Alright, and then the color has the primary color. So we could reuse this variable all across styles all throughout the page, all throughout the website. Nesting, we can now nest CSS styles like we would HTML elements. For example, we have a nav here. Okay, so inside the nav we have a UL, and we also have an LI and an A link. Alright, so you can see it's nested inside of the style. And it's obviously this will get all the ULs that are in the nav. Same thing here, all the LIs and all the A tags that are in the nav. Partials and importing, we can create modular files to include in other Sass files, and this makes things really easy to maintain. Alright, a partial is simply a Sass file named with a leading underscore, and we can import these files using the double slash here, the double forward slash. So in this example we have a file and we're including this underscore reset.scss file at the top. Mix-ins, so we can group together CSS declarations to be used throughout the site. Values can even be passed into a mix-in just like a function parameter, and it is essentially a CSS function. So this example here we have a mix-in called border radius, pass in a radius, and then we're going to assign it to these values here. Alright, and then down here inside the box class we're including that mix-in. So you can see this stuff is pretty easy as far as the syntax. We also have extending and inheritance, so we can extend properties from one selector to another. So in this example we have a message class that has a border, padding, and color, and then we have a success which we want to have all the same stuff, we just want to add an additional color. So we can actually extend message here and include everything. Alright, and then just add an additional border color. Alright, we do the same thing with this error and warning. So operators, basically standard math operators that are available in Sass. If we look at this example here, this style, we want the width here. We're using 600 pixels, and then we're using the divided by 960 pixels multiplied by 100%. All right, same thing down here. So we can use these simple math operators. Now there's a few ways to compile Sass, because obviously the browser can't read Sass or SCSS files. It has to get compiled down to CSS. Alright, so we can basically use three different methods. Say we can use applications such as CodeEdit, Compass.app, Koala, Scout, GhostLab. Some of these are free, some of them are paid. And they're just programs that will run on our Windows machine or on Linux or Mac. And we can just add a folder, add a project, and then just have it compile the Sass files. We can also use the command line. We can use it on Linux, Windows, and Mac. You do need Ruby installed for that. And then we can also have it compile at runtime using a task runner like Grunt or Gulp. And we're going to get into those in the next section. All right, so we're not going to do that just yet, but we will be doing it later on in the course. Alright, so that's going to do it for our introduction to Sass. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to set up a compiler, and we'll go from there.